deal with here, and all of our stakeholders. It's absolutely essential. Being able to communicate as we're dealing with fires and let you know what's going on, being able to hear from you as we go, being able to just work together and get that job done is critical. We are as successful as we are in practicing the work that we do. These last 2 years have given us way more practice, I think, than we'd like to have had. But working together helps us figure out how we become more efficient, more effective in terms of suppressing the fires and doing a lot of other things that relate to the fire season as well. We'll continue this year that focus. We have a couple of fire simulations. We get together as groups in more local areas to run through a fire scenario, rehearse, if you will, the kind of things that we take on. DNR has been a big partner in doing that. We'll be doing one of those exercises up here in May, one down in the Clay Elm area a little bit after that, early in June. And again, the focus is on practicing, working through the glitches, the kinks, making sure that we're ready to go. That said, I'm really hopeful. We were flying today. We looked over a lot of the Okanagan County and the National Forest on the north end of this forest. Saw a lot of snow up there, a lot of water moving, a lot of green up in different areas down lower. So we're encouraged by that, but that's only going to go so far. All of that grass that's grown is going to dry up, and then we're going to start seeing fires again. So we're going to take that on, and we're going to do it together with our partners. As we do that, as we look back over the last 5 to 10 years, the costs of fire suppression on the National Forest and at large are continuing to grow. Right now, the Forest Service spends slightly more than half of its agency budget on firefighting in one form or another. At the rate we're going, if the same increase in cost continues here within the next 10 or 15 years, we're headed for 2/3 of the agency budget going that same direction. That is not a good way to spend taxpayer dollars. We'd like to spend it on the front end, performing the restoration kinds of work, figuring out the land that we can thin, that we can introduce fire to in prescribed fashion, that we can reduce the amount of fuel out there so that when these fires happen, and they will, that they are small or at least less severe, low intensity, give us a chance to get to them and put them out, and so that they don't get to be like some of the fires that we've seen here. Being able to do something about that cost, though, when we spend that kind of money, we are spending more than what we're allocated from Congress and down from our headquarters office. We've done that a number of times here in the last 10 years. As that continues, I mean, we have to come up with the money somewhere, and so what happens is the money is transferred back from our other work back into the agency budget to pay for fire. Last year, in 2015, $700 million was transferred back away from the National Forest to pay for those fires. Now that was the right thing to do. We got to cover the cost, but that was $700 million that didn't go into contracts that put in newer refurbished recreation facilities, or contracts that treated fuel over thousands of acres, or doing any one of lots of different things that are really important out on the National Forest, in many cases important to the fire situation. So we need some help, and we're looking for a different way to pay for that. Fire is an emergency situation. It in our opinion, is not just a normal item in your budget here. We've got to find a different way to fund that here, and we're working at that. We had a chance today to go out and look at a little bit of some of the post-fire rehabilitation work that's being done out there on the ground. We were able to hear a little bit about the burned area emergency response work that the Forest Service and the state and local organizations do, and understand a little bit more about how that works. There are funds available to do the emergency work, the open the road back up or pull a culvert out if the road has washed out since then. But there isn't work to do all of there isn't money to do the long-term work that's necessary out there. But as you can imagine, and as we saw flying over the landscape here this afternoon, the huge extent of the fire and the impacts of rain and snow melt on soil and everything else. There's a lot of work to do out there, and we don't have a way to pay for all that. We're going to get the emergency work done, but we're going to continue on looking for ways to do that. The solution over the long term is forest restoration. It's going out there and getting lands thinned, as many acres as we can possibly do, across as large a landscape as we can possibly do it. You'll hear the phrase from me in the future, increasing the pace and scale of restoration, getting more thinning done across more acres, bringing fire in, prescribed fire in, following that thinning to take care of the remaining fuel there. All in the interest of next year, 5 years away, when that fire starts close by and burns into that forest area, that it's not going to be a severe fire that takes off for the community down the road there. We have to do that. We have to figure out ways internally and working with partners to be able to get more of that work done. We're doing more and more work in collaborative fashion. We have 3 forest collaboratives that are at work, and you're standing up getting me to finish it, aren't you? I'm gonna roll it right to the end, right there. The key is going to be working with partners and finding out how we get more of that restoration work done that's going to reduce the impact of fires. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Mike. That happens to me all the time. Next we have TJ Dargan, FEMA.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thanks, Congressman, for inviting FEMA and myself to participate in this discussion tonight. As I look around, I do see a lot of familiar faces, community leaders that I've worked with since the Carlton Complex fire. In fact, I'm a federal coordinating officer for this year's wildfires. I was in that same position last year as well. We had an office right here in this very room. We had about 30 FEMA staff out here for about 3 months. So I'm very familiar with many of you people and the facilities in this area. Again, my name is TJ Dargan. I'm a federal coordinating officer with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. After the President declares a major disaster, I work alongside state, tribal, and local members of the response and recovery team to ensure disaster-affected communities receive the best support available from the federal government. Excuse me. Once we have that federal disaster declaration, I and FEMA staff from around the country arrive in support of the state of Washington. As the federal coordinating officer, I partner with the state coordinating officer. That gentleman is one of the best in the nation, and he's here, Mr. Kurt Harden. And it's been a pleasure working with him both last year and this year. With him is also Casey Broom, his External Affairs Director. Also with me is another External Affairs Director from FEMA, Ms. Rachel Norris. Rachel, would you wave to everybody? She's available to answer questions, and she'll be at a table in the back with some literature about FEMA programs after the question and answer concludes. Over the past 10 years, FEMA approved 51 fire declarations in the state of Washington. Of those 51, nearly 50%, or 24 of them, were in 2014 and 15. That includes 2 presidential declarations, 2 emergency declarations, and 20 fire management assistance grants. We call those FMAGs. We know that Washington suffered its worst wildfire season in state history in 2015. Over 1 million public and private acres were burned, bringing with it the threat of flash flooding, debris, and mudslides. The Okanagan Complex fire, which burned more than 500,000 acres, was the largest in state history. The community understands wildfire risk. Last summer, our friends and neighbors in central and eastern Washington were risking their lives to fight the fires, evacuate people, and keep them out of harm's way. And as we all know, very sadly, the lives of 3 young firefighters were lost. Today, I want to talk about how we have supported response and recovery efforts, focusing on the unity of effort with state, local, and tribal partners to prepare for, protect against, respond to, and recover from this increasingly powerful hazard. FEMA is only one part of the emergency management teams. It takes the whole community, as you all know, local, state, tribal, and federal partners pulling together to make the greatest strides towards sustainable long-term recovery. I want to pause here and commend the efforts of this community and its long-term recovery leadership for their absolutely tireless work in building back a stronger and more resilient community. Carlene, where's Carlene? Did she step out? Most of you know Carlene Anders and John Weiss. Is John still here? They both stepped outside. The work that those two are doing is a best practice across this country, and I will be documenting it as such and sharing their stories, their dynamics, their processes, and their organization for communities across this country in any kind of recovery effort. They are doing a phenomenal job, and it has been a pleasure working with them for the last year and a half, 2 years now. But please, if you would, take a moment to thank them for the phenomenal work they're doing on your behalf. Before last summer's major fire declaration for the wildfires, Washington received 12 FMAGs. Those go to local jurisdictions to defray the cost of fighting the fire. Those FMAGs are granted while the fire is burning and address the cost of fire suppression. Those FMAGs this year will total tens of millions of dollars, and we're still working on developing what those actual costs will be as the fire suppression costs actually come in. Now there's John and Carlene now. I would love for everybody to give them a round of applause for the phenomenal work they do. Thank you. Let's see, we're continuing our work with the Washington Emergency Management Department to help communities like yours affected in last year's summer wildfires through the Public Assistance Grant Program. That's what I bring to the table as a result of President Obama's disaster declaration, the Public Assistance Program. To date, we've put $3 million to eligible applicants, and we estimate that the public assistance grants for last year's wildfire season will total more than $36 million. Some of those projects include $1.4 million for the Chelan County Public Utility District No. 1 to restore power to 9,000 customers, $500,000 to Okanogan County to repair 20 miles of aggregate service on Lyman Lake and Moses Meadows Road, $300,000 to the Okanogan County Electric Cooperative, and $10,000 to the City of Omak for emergency protective measures such as traffic control during evacuations. Last year, in the Carlton Complex fire, there was $33 million put back into Washington State, of which $30 million of that came to Okanogan County. Of that $30 million, $22 million is the federal share, and $8 million is paid by the state of Washington, which is standard. 25% is a local cost. In addition to public assistance, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program was authorized by the President to fund mitigation measures in Washington. Under that program, additional grants totaling 15% of the disaster recovery costs will come to the state to fund mitigation projects. Is he getting up? He's about to stand up. Okay, I'll cut to the chase. FEMA's strength lies in our ability to work across jurisdictional boundaries and forge partnerships with stakeholders and communities such as those that are here today in an effort to reduce risk. We'll continue to support response and recovery in a unity of effort with regional partners through our grant program, planning efforts, and technical assistance to promote community resilience and sustainable long-term recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that very much. Oh, we do have a microphone, so if you want to use the microphone, please do, so everybody can hear your comment or your question. But now the important part of the evening, we want to hear from you. And so, like I said, nobody's shy in Okanogan, I know. Who wants to be first? We've got, I saw the gentleman in black stand up, so if you want to do the honors of breaking the ice, we appreciate that. Jessica, here we go.
Hello, my name is Warren Smithers. I live at Alto Lake, Terrace, Washington. We lost our home in 2014. Lately, we've been getting post notices to protect our property, no burn zones. Okay, there's property in front of us that someone has bought it, no one will say who it is. We've written the commissioners, the county people to find out who owns the property, to take care of it, to build the fire prevention that needs to be done in there. We haven't gotten no replies back yet. And also, for the DNR and Forest Service, I remember back in the early 70s, you guys sold timber to make money. This is not Bernie Sanders standing here telling you to quit your job, that we're going to give you welfare. Create money to pay for fighting the forest fires. Because my taxes went up this year, and I want something done about it. I'm tired of hearing this. We went to the meeting last year at Alta Lake, Forest Service guy there, fire coming over the ridge. Goes, you're on level 3. You need to evacuate. We have no equipment to help you at all if the fire comes over the hill. But they have a base camp there. Firefighters, crews, everything. I was fortunate enough last year to be friends with Alex Thompson in Brewster. He bought a fire truck. I drove and operated that fire truck during the fires up here, trying to help people out. We asked for zero money. Zero. People come out and says, hey, we can't afford to pay it. Hey, I've been through the same thing. I'll take a handshake. I'll take a hug.
I'd love to direct your question to the commissioner, but he just told me he had to catch a flight.
That is not surprising. One bit.
I bet, but we can get a message to him, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, sir.
James Miller, Okanagan County citizen, retired. Grew up in Okanagan. In 1968, I'd like to just go back in time real quickly, and I'll be real fast because I'm illustrating a point. Policies that have been going on have failed, and it hasn't just been recently, it's been over a long time and for many reasons. 1968, I was hired to survey timber access roads in the Toads Coulee Basin. The reason was the beetles and the disease were destroying trees very quickly, and it was decided at that time, when the timber industry was thriving here, that it was appropriate to log that, to thin it out, to take those diseased trees and manage that forest. Well, we built that road. I spent 2 summers, worked very hard, very diligently. We built a great big wide road. It was paved.